Almarie, it's great to have you with me today. You and I met through a mutual friend, Shoshana, which was amazing. I had her on the podcast, and I've known her for about maybe 3 years now, I think. So I'm glad you and I were able to connect, and we had a brief discussion, and you were talking about your journey, and that's what allowed us to say, hey, let's come on the podcast, and you share your journey in life with others, and hopefully you can help them. So why don't you just start off with like who you are, and where you're at today, and we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel like my life experiences have brought me to this point. I was a classmate. I was a former classmate with Shoshana at Tufts University. So it's great that we connected. My name is Almarie Fernandez. Right now, I'm a functional medicine coach. What brought me to this journey was an autoimmune diagnosis.
Okay. And can you explain, what got you, I guess maybe what the process is. So you went through that, right? How did you find out that you had autoimmune disease?
Well, it was around 2008. I was going through a lot of acute stressors in my life. And then all of a sudden I had skin lesions on my hands. Like they were like bumpy, like red spots. It was a little bit embarrassing because I didn't know what was causing it, and people were like pointing it out, and it's like, what's wrong with your hands? So I had an earlier experience with conventional medicine, so it wasn't a pleasant experience. So I decided to take a different route. And my partner at the time was like, you have to get this checked. Like you have to do something about this. So I went to see a dermatologist, and she did a biopsy, and she confirmed that I had an autoimmune disease. And then I took a different route. I went to see a naturopath, and the naturopath referred me to a rheumatologist. And there was something in me that was saying like, I haven't given my body a chance to heal. And at the time I was working at a gym, and I was exposed to all these like healthy behaviors, healthy eating, and I knew that I could do better. So the autoimmune disease, how it's treated in the conventional medicine, they look a lot about genetics and sometimes environment, but this specific autoimmune disease is a disease of the immune system. So I knew that my immune system was weak in a way, and if I removed the triggers and I removed the environmental stressors, that there was a potential chance that I could get better. So that's what led me into functional medicine, which is a whole new field. And functional medicine has a very different view about autoimmune diseases than conventional medicine. And I also want to point out that like this specific autoimmune disease, in many ways, autoimmune diseases are all the same. They're all the same root. They're all treated the same way. This specific autoimmune disease, like it gives you rashes, confusion, it can do hair loss. It targets different skin, different tissues, and different organs. So it's very hard to diagnose. And since the symptoms are so varied, it could coincide with other diseases. But what's characteristic about this autoimmune disease is a butterfly rash on the face. Right now I'm wearing blush, but it's a butterfly rash on the face. And then it also lowers your red blood cell counts, your white blood cells. So it messes with many organs at the same time, particularly the heart, lungs, and even the kidneys. So it's something to be mindful of and take seriously. And, once you're given the autoimmune disease diagnosis, you want to make changes in your life. So that's what I did.
Yeah. And do you find people that have like diseases like this not know it? I mean, like, like say for instance, I might have something right and I just like brush it off because I don't think it's anything big, you know. Do you think a lot of people do something like that?
I think that most people, they're at a stage that they know that there's something wrong with them. There's something that's happening, because it's not uh very mild. It's like sometimes they'll have like rashes on their arm. They'll be like, hey, I went out, I have a rash, or I have some kind of skin rash. It's not going away. It's very peculiar. Like they'll have sensitivity, like for this particular autoimmune disease. And there's many. I'll name them. There's lupus, there's Sjogren's, there's RA, there's multiple sclerosis. The type that I had, it targets different tissues and organs. Um, at some point I thought I had another autoimmune disease, but I think it's pretty obvious. Like people will know, they'll be like, no, something's wrong, but they might brush it off, which I encourage you, if you have symptoms like acute, like brain fog, even like brain fog, don't brush it off, because it could be neurological, but it could be coming from an autoimmune disease. So if you have depression, anxiety, that could also be a symptom of an autoimmune disease, because it's attacking, it can attack the brain, the heart, the lungs.
And they all attack. They're all different. Like yours can attack that, but others attack different areas of the body.
Yeah, mine. The most it the I it mostly attacked my skin, but I kept going to get my blood drawn and see what stage was I. So with functional medicine, there is a hope that you can go into remission or you can stay pretty stable. Like I made changes very early on. I learned that my food affects everything. So for example, like I learned that something as simple as bread could trigger an autoimmune response. And bread has a protein called gluten, and that gluten, what it does in the body is that it does sort of like molecular mimicry. So it kind of it attacks the tissues and the organs if I eat it, because it looks like, for example, like your thyroid. So it could attack, instead of being digested, it permeates the gut, and it goes into the bloodstream, and it can attack other organs. It can attack the thyroid. So something, when people say gluten-free is not a fad. Gluten-free is something that I personally recommend to my clients, going gluten-free for life. And what I do is that I let them figure out for themselves how food affects them. So elimination diet is still the golden standard in care.
Is there like a certain amount of gluten that somebody could probably take and it not really affect them too much?
Well, if they go to Europe, they can probably have all the pasta and bread that they want, because there is not, it's not, the process is not like it here. The gluten is put on the shelves, like it doesn't go through a process of like how bread is, like sour. It's just, some people can probably do sourdough bread. It depends if you're gluten sensitive, if you're gluten intolerant. I always tell my clients to consider themselves gluten intolerant. So because for some people, it's cross contamination can even be an issue. Okay. So it really depends on the person. But once you have autoimmune disease, the golden standard is to go at least gluten-free.
Right. But like bread is made in different areas, and that's what you were trying to say. Like over in Europe, they don't use gluten. Is that right?
No, like the bread is done in a way that probably it's more digestible. Like gluten's still there, but it's probably more digestible, because it's like I know of people that go to Europe and they have bread and pasta in Europe and they're fine because they go by different standards. The food source there is more, even the beauty industry, everything, it's more regulated. I feel like the FDA does a really poor job at trying to like. I know that they're gonna. I heard from someone they're gonna switch to European standards. That would be really ideal, because this is another topic. But the toxins in your environment is something that I also tell my clients that they want to avoid. Like it goes, like for example, to backtrack a little bit, in conventional medicine, they look at autoimmune disease and they look at genetics, perhaps environment, but they mostly do genetics. So they tell you you can take steroids for the rest of your life, like corticosteroids for the rest of your life, but that depresses the immune system. And that the steroids could be a risk for heart disease. So they talk about the symptoms and suppressing the symptoms, but they basically say you're going to have this for the rest of your life. In functional medicine, what we do is that, yes, we acknowledge there's a genetic predisposition. For example, there's 25 genes that are contributing to lupus, for example. And then, but they also, they acknowledge there's an enhanced intestinal permeability, like the brain is quote unquote leaky. And that's what I learned when I went to the naturopath. The naturopath said, oh, you have leaky gut. It's the first time I've ever heard of that. Basically, the particles go into the bloodstream, and from there they can attack, like they're seen as an invader or an intruder, and they can attack tissues and organs. So there's the digested particles of your food are not containing your food, but they go into the bloodstream, which we don't want that. And then there's an environmental trigger, there's toxins, there's bacteria. And we are also dealing with a fourth item, which is an overall weakened immune system, which we want to work on the immune system. We don't want to exactly depress the immune system. Now, I'm not saying that conventional medicine doesn't have a time and a place. I obviously don't treat, cure, prevent, or diagnose disease. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, but I think there's a lot of value in looking at functional medicine and what functional medicine has to say about autoimmune diseases. Yeah. Because it's all encompassing. Like, you have to change your environment. It's like you put a fish in a pond, and sometimes you have to medicate the fish, right? But if you have a dirty pond and you have the fish, well, it's obvious that we have to clean the dirty pond so that the fish can thrive.
So that's what you're doing with your body and the food you're taking in. You're cleaning yourself.
Yes. So for instance, it can be, and this is something like weight loss. Like, people think it's just calories in, calories out. And sure, caloric deficit can have an effect on weight loss, but you're not looking at the water that's not pure, that's not filtered, that you're drinking. You're not looking at minerals. You're not looking at the toxicity of beauty products. Like, I changed everything. I recommend people to go slowly, because at first it's like a shock. But it's good to have the diagnosis. One, it's good to monitor it, right? Because we want to monitor it. There's things that are silent that we want to know about, and there's specific markers in the blood that will tell us, like, where is this going? There's, like, for instance, if you were screening for lupus, there's specific antibodies that your doctor would know how to look for it. Like, a rheumatologist would be a good person, but it's good to do these. Like, I know that I put my life a little bit on overhaul at first. I decided to let go of gluten. I treat it very seriously. I treat it like I have an autoimmune disease. Like, if I have a little bit of gluten, The worst thing that can happen is that it stays for 6 months in your system. But those are 6 months that it wreaks havoc. So it's not ideal. So if someone has accidental gluten consumption, no big deal. But if someone is having constantly bread, pasta, things like that, right now there's so many gluten-free options. Back in the 90s, this was something very foreign, and people with celiac disease were having a tough time. Like nowadays, it's very straightforward. It's very, very common going gluten-free. Gluten can cause a lot of inflammation. It's not just gluten, but gluten's like one of the main ones. For autoimmune disease, what they talk is gluten, dairy, soy, and grains. Now, I haven't gone as strict as grains. Some people go into an autoimmune protocol and then they decide to further eliminate things like tomatoes, peppers, potatoes, nightshade, vegetables. But I find that is very overwhelming. So if they do something like gluten-free and dairy-free, that could help them a lot.
So for you stopped gluten first?
I stopped gluten first.
Right.
Like I remember going to an naturopath and I was like, what can I eat? Because everything was like grayed out. I did a food sensitivity test and she was like, you can have quinoa. And I didn't know what quinoa was at the time. So everyone has had some exposure these days to more natural foods. But back then I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. And so after the gluten, what did you decide to drop out off your list of eating then?
I decided after gluten, I decided dairy was a good one for me. Mm-hmm. Although I must say I have introduced it lately, but good dairy like artisan cheeses and stuff, and dairy doesn't sit well with me. Like I feel like once you eliminate a food and give your body a break and reintroduce it, your body will tell you, like, this is a good idea or this is not a good idea.
It makes sense. Yeah. And for me, like sometimes there's in the past and sometimes even now, like I'll eat tomatoes. I love tomatoes, but then after a while I start breaking out and I wonder why. And it's acidic and stuff, and like, oh, I can't eat them all the time, as much as
you got acid reflux?
I don't know. Maybe. If it is, it's not often. I don't know.
It can cause acid reflux. That's what I asked.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I know I just break out here and there, and then it's just like eating chips sometimes because they're salty and stuff, and you can it does this ulcers and stuff to your mouth and everything after a while, and get cuts and everything. But anyways, I mean that's just me with my food, but so. And I'm just bringing that up because how you said if you just cut something out and then you bring it back in and your body shows you the reaction it actually has with it, so then you can kind of bring it down, you can narrow it down.
Some people are able to bring foods back, like, like in your example, tomatoes, like if you let them go for a while and introduce them, you might be okay with them. Like, but gluten is one of those things. I mean, there's just so much research on gluten, on how it affects the brain, like especially, and how it can affect like the gut permeability. Like it does, like you can't have a gut working properly, and gluten is like punching holes. It's like having a colander and putting water through that colander and everything goes through. That's the same thing with gluten. Like if like people with autoimmune disease, especially, you don't even have to be autoimmune disease. I feel like a lot of people are gluten intolerant without having an autoimmune disease or gluten sensitive. Like it's one of those things that like, I don't know. There's just so many options. Even gluten-free baking for folks that like to bake, there's so many options.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed in the past 20 years maybe or whatever,
Yeah.
So you see it on the shelves, you hear people baking and stuff all the time, and and some, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'll have it and it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't necessarily have to feel the symptoms. I'm not talking about you, but people don't necessarily have to feel the symptoms. That's why it's so tricky. So, because I know I introduced it back into my diet, I'm like, oh, I feel fine. Gluten doesn't affect me anymore, and I had to take it seriously because I know from people with autoimmune disease, once you're giving an autoimmune disease disorder, like the chances of having a second and third autoimmune disease, they're higher. So that's something for people to be mindful. And I don't know if I commented on this, but like another thing that happened was that I remember having like my fingers very like in the cold they would go numb or they would go white and so it was affecting my circulation and everything. I remember having like a machine with literally with hot wax. So, and sometimes I'm like, I can't, like, I was having like really cold feet. So I had all these like little symptoms, but I want to focus on the solution for people that are out there listening. Like, they're saying, I have an autoimmune disease. What's next? Well, you always want to monitor it at least with yearly blood work. Like that would be ideal. People would be going for their yearly blood work. They would be looking at the rheumatoid factor RF. They would be looking at anti-nuclear antibodies. They would be asking what pattern is the anti-nuclear antibodies look like. It's a specific test. They would be looking at specific antibodies that their rheumatologist would be asking them to. With functional medicine, there is hope that people can get better. And don't undermine the power of food because it's huge. It's really huge. Like people can heal from food and taking like the adequate supplement protocol to heal their gut because you wanna heal the gut and then you wanna seal it so it doesn't permeate. If you also work on your stress levels, that's huge because if you are in a state of chronic stress, you're never going to get well. And it can even be a trigger for autoimmune disease. Like people get triggered, they have rashes or they have lesions. Like I experienced a little bit of that. Like a couple of years ago, I was under major stress and then I had a big patch on my arm. I was like, what is this? And it was stress. And I did a whole protocol with vitamin C, but that's the only flare that I can remember. I really didn't had experienced a flare before because I caught it very early on. But you want to take a look at the environment. If there's any traumatic events, if there's any infections in the body, if there's any bacteria in the body, like a lot of people with autoimmune disease, they'll have the Epstein-Barr virus. They'll have it like that. Most of the population has the Epstein-Barr virus, but if it gets reactivated, it's a problem. So they wanna know if there's any infections, underlying infections, things like that. And then they the most basic at the top of the iceberg, like they want to clean their food. They want to slowly go, like organic would be ideal. I know organic gets expensive. If they can't do everything organic, at least their meats, their salmon, their fish, because the toxins are inside the tissues of the fat. So it's very important to have like organic meats, or if they don't do organic meats, at least they can Google what's the dirty dozen and the clean 15. The dirty dozen is the 12 vegetables and fruits that have been considered to have the most pesticides, and the clean 15, like I would never go for a banana organic, like because it has a peel, or the avocado, like but to clean the diet as much as possible, it's a little bit pricey, but it's worth it. And to slowly see what products am I using on my face, the beauty products,
You really have to break down everything that you use and you eat and what you put on and in your body. So, I mean, do you have something like that, you use or other people can use that, like you said, track things? Like you can say, okay, this is what I had and this is how it affected me or not, if you notice anything.
You can do a food diary. People can do a food diary. As far as tracking, they can. I used to recommend a beauty counter for beauty products, but right now, unfortunately, the company is going through a transition time. There's good companies out there like Crunchy. Let's see. Monet is questionable, but there are better companies out there that are doing stuff. Beauty products are harder to get regulated than food. I think food is easier, but with beauty products it's harder. Yeah, you want to be able. I think a tracker would be a good way to start. Like have two trackers. You can have a habit tracker and you can have a food diary. So a habit tracker, you would put down like what you're doing and what you need to do. Like for instance, if you want to hydrate with 8 glasses of water, you put drinking hydration 8 glasses of water. If you are eating, you just have a food diary and see how you feel after a food. Like a big one is brain fog. If you're feeling brain foggy, if you're feeling that you're not feeling up to par, then definitely that's an issue that the food is affecting something, and the food is affecting.
Okay. So is that the stuff that you used along your journey as far as tracking everything?
Yeah, and I am human. Like I've been in groups too. Like sometimes I need like a second set of eyes. So I've been tracking my habits too. So this is something that I've learned to do, like being part of other groups, of other wellness groups. So definitely I would say get involved in the community. Um and I'll give you my handle later, my Instagram handle on how people need to contact me. But basically have a support network. Like this is really important. More than tracking, have a support network, because when you are surrounded by people that are happy and healthy, then you're motivated to do the same. You know, I back when I started my journey, I was working for HealthWorks, for a fitness center for women, and it was very commercial and everything. And so I saw people that were competing for bodybuilding, and I don't think that's the healthiest. By the way, I really don't think that restriction is very necessary. But I started seeing people with fresh meals, and I thought I was getting fresh at restaurants. So I started really looking at the food source. And I know that a trainer back then was like, do you know that you go to Dunkin' Donuts and an egg has like 30 ingredients? And I was like, I didn't know. I was getting egg. I thought I was doing healthy. I was having whole grain bread, having uh, ham instead of bacon, because I thought it was healthier. I was having egg whites. And that would be my breakfast every day. And I was being healthy. Like I've always been inspired to be healthy, but like I didn't know I could do better. And when I started working, then I worked for Bank of America, and I noticed there was a huge change when I decided to change my food. And yeah, I still go out, I still eat out, but like I have certain criteria that, like, I always look for my protein and my vegetables. That's where I'm safe mostly. Like when they start frying stuff and everything, I'm in trouble because of cross contamination. A tip for going out is that you can say you're canola allergic, so they can take it seriously, and they can cook with olive oil and butter. This is canola doesn't have gluten, but these oils like canola, sunflower oil, safflower oil, all these like seed oils, like the seed by itself, sunflower is fine. The sunflower oil is the one that's pretty toxic. So it affects the membranes it affects the cell membrane. It damages the cell membrane. So if you can at least, even like if you don't make any change after today, and if you start going out to restaurants, just say that, can you cook it in olive oil? Or can you cook it in butter? Because the body has mechanisms to digest sugar. Like the body has mechanisms. I'm not promoting a sugar-laden diet, but the body, like these oils, they affect the cell membrane, and then they kind of like they over time, like the cell is not able to do its job. So I think that's when you go gluten-free, you're automatically, like if you're doing it the right way, you're automatically getting healthy because you're cooking at home with good oils, with avocado oil, with butter, with ghee, with real fats. And I think that's the magic. Like some people don't like cooking at home, but I can't, like, I always say, of course you need a breather, but you can't replicate what's done at home. Like, people were at the time, you know, in the early the 1940s, 1950s, people were slimmer, they were healthier. And then came industrialization, and came the need of like doing everything mass production, and like the nutritional guidelines of 1977, like they really screwed us over, because like you're going from 3 meals to like snacking every time and like getting things out of bags. I always tell people, you can shop the middle aisles, like there's good stuff, but you have to learn what to look for. And I help people do that, like what to look for, like things like avocado oil, good oils, like, you know, avoid, if there's something like canola or sunflower, try to avoid that as much as possible. And you're automatically avoiding the other allergens.
That's cool. Yeah. And so how does somebody connect with you?
Well, my Instagram handle is at Almarie Fernandez Health, A-L-M as in Mary, A-R-I-E, Fernandez, F-E-R-N-A-N-D-E-Z, Health, altogether. I'm also on LinkedIn if you find me, Almarie Fernandez, on Facebook, but I mostly work my business page on Instagram. And in the link tree, there's a link to work with me. So you can also find me at heal.me. And if you look for my name, Almarie Fernandez, I should pop up.
Thank you. Yeah. And you shared a lot, you know, just along your journey of what you went through and how people can, you know, get better and, you know, hopefully lose it. I don't know if it all will eventually go away, right? But you can minimize it as much as possible.
I think that people should be hopeful. Like, there have been many instances of people just managing with food. Sometimes people need more. That's why there are yearly blood work tests. You know, you start small. I say start small. Start with stress, something like stress or breathing, and then work your way up, because like stress really is a killer. We talk about cancer, but cancer is relatively survivable unless it's like stomach cancer or something. If it's detected early, it's survivable. Like heart disease is still the #1 killer. And autoimmune disease affects the skin, the joints, the organs. Like it depending on the autoimmune disease that someone has. You know, and if they're dealing with neurological issues, like don't discard autoimmune disease. Like it could be autoimmune, because it can attack the brain, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys. So if someone's dealing with anxiety and depression, even if they try to go gluten-free, like you can try like gluten-free Oreos. Like that's not ideal, but if, you know, asking someone to go from a very processed diet to chicken and broccoli, that's very hard, you know? So try something like the version of the food that they like, gluten-free, even if it has bad oils. And then from there, you make little changes. I think that to be sustainable in your health, you have to keep small promises to yourself. So if someone told me like, I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to do watch out, I'm going to do every day workout. I was like, why don't commit yourself to 1 time or 2 times? Or why don't commit to like as much fresh water, clean water as you can? Like, it's a lot of it. And even trainers say it, like, it's about keeping your word. People are unhealthy because they go the all or nothing mindset. They're like, oh, I ate this, might as well screw it. I'm going to screw the entire day, the entire week, instead of starting fresh every day and saying, oh, today I'm going to do 5 minutes of meditation, or today I'm going to eat a healthier meal, or include protein and fiber. There's many ways. So I don't want people to get overwhelmed. I know that I gave a lot of information because I'm a helper. I want to help people out. So if you have any questions, if someone has any questions, they can look at my Instagram handle, Almarie Fernandez Health, and they can get ideas. They can get in touch with me. I do like 20 to 30, like a complimentary 20 to 30-minute call where they can tell me what's happening, and they'll always leave the call with a tip, if anything.
That's good. Yeah. So, I have one question I ask everybody at the end of my podcast episodes. So what are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey?
Number 1, breathe. Number 2, regulate circadian rhythm, like your sleep and wake cycle. And number 3, do your best and everything will be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all,
don't, ruminating over bad thoughts is just going to get everything worse. Like when I got diagnosed, I went down on my knees and I said, God, I know this is for a higher purpose. And I think that's what many people that go through a hard process, they know that they're being refined, they're being like getting ready for something bigger, but like they know that like it's not just the disease process or anything. There's something on the other side, but everything's gonna be okay. Just take it one step at a time, and it might be a good indication that you need to make changes in your life. It's like that nudge that you've been waiting for. That's what it is.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So do your best. That's great. I appreciate it. Almarie, I'm glad you came on and shared so much about, the autoimmune diseases and, how you went through it and helped so many people. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.